If you're a game dev YouTuber, there is one question that you're always going to get from your audience. The number one question is going to be, what engine should I use to get started with game development? And also, if you're a game dev YouTuber, the number one comment you're going to get on basically every single video, especially in our case when we use Unity, is, why are you guys still using Unity? You're going to bankrupt your entire company. You're never going to find success. You should just switch to Godot or switch to Unreal Engine or whatever. I'm here at Unity U-Day in Tokyo, and look, we're not switching away from Unity anytime soon, but I want to kind of talk about why that is. Why do we like Unity to a certain degree? Why do I think Unity is still a pretty good engine, no matter what people on the internet say? And also just talk a bit more about what makes a good engine to begin with in the first place. So to give you some more context, I said I'm like Unity U-Day Tokyo. I'm assuming not a lot of people know what this is. Basically, this is like a baby version of Unity Unite. Because Unity Unite is in Barcelona, it's way too far for me to go to. So I went up here, I paid for this trip myself, there is zero sponsorship for me to be here, I can say whatever I want. And I did also go to Unity Unite 2 years ago, back when it was in Amsterdam. There's a video over there you can watch if you want to like learn more about how the experience was there. And back then my sentiment towards Unity was actually pretty negative. I think the main takeaway of that video when I went to Unity Unite was, Unity has forgotten indie game developers. And now I'm here at the Unity U-Day, and over the past 2 years, basically, that feeling has kind of disappeared. And especially now, you know, when talking to the people here, talking to like some of the game developers, some of the people of Unity, I also talked to the Unity team back at Gamescom, which is another very interesting video if you want to know that. I feel like Unity has changed a lot, and it has changed a lot in a good way, where this is one thing that I always have to kind of talk about if I make a video where I say anything remotely positive about Unity. It's like, yes, 2 years ago, they did a massive fuck up of a PR thing with like announcing the runtime fee, changing their entire pricing, rug pulling like kind of their customers. But it's been 2 years now. And I think for the last 2 years, all they have done basically is, one, fix what they broke, and two, make sure it never really happens again. So old leadership, for the most part, is gone. Yeah, they had to go in like crazy cost-saving mode, but they kept working on the engine, and they kind of dialed it back and started focusing more on what do developers actually want. That's what I noticed here as well. When I went to the Unity Unite event 2 years ago, everyone was just talking about like Unity Muse, I think was their AI generated stuff back then, or like Unity Sentis. I think those are both dead at this point. And then like all of their live services stuff, like everything was being pushed into live services and monetization and all of that. And it's like, oh yeah, about the engine, we have like a few things, but there was, it was missing that like focus on, let's make games better, or like let's make the process of making games better, and let's just instead focus on how do we monetize our games, like how do we grow our games. Unity themselves, they like kind of divide themselves into 3 parts, they say. It's like develop, deploy, and grow. And grow is kind of like, you know, the live services stuff and all of the Unity Cloud and whatever. And the Unity Grow aspect has kind of taken a seat back, and it's very much focused now on the Unity Develop, number 1, and then Unity Deploy, number 2, and then there's like a little bit of Unity Grow, but not that much anymore. And for someone like me, who is an indie game developer, who has zero interest in making a live service MMO game or like a multiplayer game for the next 5 years, that's perfect for me. I don't really care about that stuff. I want to just have a good experience with the Unity engine and being able to use it without me wanting to tear my hair out. Shout out to Unity 6.2 introducing a memory leak bug that like basically ruined my productivity for 3 weeks, but it seems to finally be fixed in 6.3. These are kind of the things that they are focusing now on making sure that there is more stability with the engine in general, making sure that there are version upgrades that will not completely brick your project, always looking back at, okay, going from 6.1 to 6.2 to 6.3, you should be fine for the most part in terms of upgrading without having these massive breaking changes. They focus way more on that. They focus on just improving the general development like workflow, basically. This is going to be a weird one, but going back to that fact of like there was a giant massive memory leak, I was very happy to hear like, oh yeah, we're going to invest more in profiling, we're going to invest more in like all of those things basically to make sure that you have a better, smoother experience developing. That is the stuff that I care about. The engine itself is pretty mature at this point in terms of general tools and all of that. So just make the experience way nicer. Like they're working on like reworking the hierarchy. Once again, are these like sexy things? Maybe not. This is not what's going to lure in new developers. But it is something that's going to make someone like me, someone who has been using Unity for a few years at this point, way more happy with using the engine in my day-to-day life. It is, at the end of the day, the primary tool that I use as well. I am pretty happy with Unity. And to also talk about, like, why don't we move away from Unity? Because that's the question we get as well, of course. Like, you should just go to Godot, or you should just go to Unreal. And it's like, don't think that I've never considered, like, installing Godot or installing Unreal and, like, kind of figuring it out, especially with the style of games that we make, which is currently more of, like, the anomaly games, horror games, and all of that. It's like, yeah, we could perfectly make this in Unreal as well. Do I want to learn it? Maybe. On the other hand, there's also something that you need to keep in mind, especially when you're a developer like us who has been working in an engine for multiple years at this point. You kind of get lock-in to a certain degree. Yeah, you have studios like Slay the Spire who can, like, broadly proclaim of, like, yeah, we're now going to get rid of Unity after the runtime fee and we're going to switch entirely to a different engine. But it's like, that's for a big studio who has a runway, who can make those decisions. If you're an indie studio, I basically estimate that for us to switch to any other game engine, we would lose 4-5 months of productivity, having to start over from zero, not being able to port all of our assets, all of our code frameworks that we've written for ourselves, the knowledge of the engine as well. And it's like, the engine is fine. We don't need to change either. I think those are, like, the good things as well of, like, yeah, it's a very big difference if, like, you're a starting game developer and you've done, like, one game jam in Unity and one game jam in Godot. It's like, yeah, I can go wherever way I want. We are probably $5,000 deep in, like, Unity Asset Store. We have our entire custom, like, internal packages and libraries written for us to make game development way faster. That is a very high amount of cost, basically, in terms of time and also monetary to a certain degree, if we would want to change. And it's like, do I really mind having to pay Unity money if I get rich? Because that's, like, the thing as well. Oh, Unity you have to pay, Godot is free. And it's like, brother, Unity you have to pay if you pay $200,000. How many of our audience has made $200,000? Not that many. And the developers that I know that have actually made very big bucks with game development, you think they really mind about paying 1,000, 2,000 euros a year? Not really. Maybe it's a bigger problem if you have, like, 50 seats and whatever, but we are indie developers on this channel at the end of the day, and that is kind of, you know, what matters as well. It's like, yeah, sure, you have to pay at some point for the engine, but I think you're paying to a certain degree in advance with Godot, even though it's free, by bottlenecking yourself because they don't have a proper asset store and all of those things. I don't know why this turned into a Godot rant. I don't hate Godot developers. I know we sometimes joke on this channel of, like, common Godot L, but I think Godot also has its place. I think Godot just doesn't have as much of a space in the general game dev world than people who use Godot think that it has. This video is gonna get, like, 40% dislikes or something at this point, whatever. I'm gonna stand by my point of, like, look, I think Unity, it's a really solid engine. Also, when I'm, like, at this event, you know, they do, like, the demo reels or, like, the made in Unity game show highlights, and it's like basically every popular game that you like is made in Unity. Megamonk, Ball X-Pit, so many of them work with Unity because Unity is just a very immature engine at the end of the day. And I want to talk a bit more than, okay, but what engine should I use, Marnix? You sound pretty happy about Unity. Does that mean that I should use Unity? And that's where, you know, it once again matters of what are you doing? Who are you as a person? Unity always made sense for us because we come from a software development background where we already knew how to write C# code. We had more of that technical approach. We were focusing more on systems heavy, mechanics heavy games. Back when we started at least. So then, yeah, Unity is a more good approach. But if you are someone who maybe if I was a solo developer, with my C# is kind of bad, let's keep it at that, then it would have perhaps been a better idea to switch to Unreal or to learn Godot script, like GD script or whatever. There are different approaches based on also the games that you want to make. And that's why I think the best thing you can do is simply make a few small prototypes or, like, game jams or whatever, trying to learn certain engines. Because every engine has a benefit. Unreal, the blueprints are something that a lot of people really, really enjoy. I know developers who are seasoned Unreal developers with, like, 10, 15 years of experience. Guess what? Some of them are still like, yeah, you can do things in C++. And Blueprint is a way more visual way to program your game to a certain degree. That Unity just doesn't have. Yeah, sure, you have Bolt, but let's be honest, Bolt is not really the way you should go and approach making games. I think the same thing for Godot. I think Godot is more of a thing of, like, I'm interested in game development. How do I say this without offending people? I think Godot is a valid choice of an engine, but I think if you're choosing Godot, you're, I think especially in the beginning, automatically kneecapping yourself and your game's development for, like, double the time basically. Because you are, like I said, losing out on the asset store, you're losing out on a lot of features, you're losing out on a lot of, like, support for somewhat core things. Like, yeah, sure, at this point you can self-publish games kind of on Godot. Unity has those things supported for like the last 10 years once again. And maybe not everyone is planning for a Switch release for your first game, but there are other things as well that are just more supported in like a Unity or an Unreal. It's also what style of game you want to make. Are you making 2D pixel art games? Godot is good. Unity is good. I also know developers who make visual novels, 2D pixel art visual novels in Unreal. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day what engine you use. Sure, some engines have better affinities, but you can make any game in any engine for the most part. Making visually stunning 3D games is going to be easier to get started with in Unreal compared to Godot, for example, because Godot, once again, doesn't have as much of a focus on 3D games. Yeah, you can make 3D games in it, and there's a lot of like 3D, like more like PSX style games, but especially those high fidelity games are not as easy to make. Like, I think at the end of the day, if you really put like a gun to my head, I was like, okay, cool story markings, but tell me what engine to use, I would probably still suggest Unity. Also, once again, because of what they're going towards in the future, where for a certain time, I don't really like the whole split of like HDRP and URP, because like, yeah, URP is like very, I think URP is really solid. I think HDRP is like 5% of developers or even less should use it. And I think also maybe going back to like what I've been talking about here is like, okay, now we're starting to merge HDRP and URP together, so you kind of get the best of both worlds. I think Unity also allows for very good rapid prototyping at the end of the day, getting started with stuff, and best of all, like the documentation. Yeah, at this point Godot is more mature in terms of like tutorial saturation, if that makes sense, but even then, there is just so much more for everything for Unity and for Unreal, because there's also a way larger user base for it. And I think that's also, you know, it's a chicken and egg problem to a certain degree. Having more people use Unity means that more people will give feedback about Unity and give like Unity, the engine, more time to evolve the engine and make it a better engine in general. So I'm not 100% sure what direction I want to end this video, but I think one thing that I do want to say is that this is like trying to reason with people on the internet, so it's never gonna go bad. But like, choosing an engine doesn't mean you're choosing like your barbarian tribe. You're either a Roman or a barbarian if you use like Godot or Unity. Don't act like it is that way. You're a game developer. If you give a talented game developer any engine, they're going to make a good game regardless. It's a tool. It's not going to be the thing that's going to decide if you're going to be a successful game developer or not. It's going to impact your game development journey, 100%. But a good game you can make regardless of what engine you're making. There's beautiful games made in custom engines, in Game Maker, in RPG Maker, in Unity, in Unreal, in Godot, in all of these engines. But you just need to have the mindset to want to make these games and not just kind of immediately try to cope and never get started on like, I don't want to commit to an engine. You don't have to commit to an engine in the beginning. You just have to commit to game development. I think if you can commit to game development and you can keep learning for yourself, almost to a certain degree, you can learn anything at the end of the day. A lot of our audience is self-taught at the end of the day. And that's the whole thing of being a self-taught game developer, is like, you're going to have to learn a lot of stuff regardless. So learning the basics of an engine, okay, this may sound like copium, but it really isn't that hard to a certain degree. It's like, sometimes I do consider of like, should we make videos of like, I switched to Unreal for a week or whatever. And to give you the honest answer of why do I not do this, because I see myself more as a game developer and not as much as a YouTuber. If I was a game dev YouTuber basically, and I didn't have to worry about actually shipping games, I'm gonna be making those challenge videos of like, I made a game in Godot in 48 hours while blindfolded or whatever. I would rather just focus on using the tools that I have right now to make more games. And that's kind of the approach that I have now. But especially you, if you're starting now, if you're a beginner game developer, you're a medium game developer, the grass is always going to look greener on the other side anyway, until you've gone there yourself. So just go and try the answers. That's basically this entire channel, and most of life in general can be summarized in one single Shia LaBeouf gif, basically. That's like the one of like, just do it. And I think that is something that you guys need to keep in mind as well. So don't hate someone for choosing Godot or choosing Unreal or choosing Unity. They're still making games. They're still trying to give a good experience to other people. And the engine at the end of the day is not going to be the determining factor of if a game is going to be good or bad. So I hope this was still a bit of an interesting video. I was originally planning a kind of different video talking more about the technical stuff with Unity, but to pull back the curtain, it did not get approved. So that's once again a problem with like big companies. It's like, I need to get approval from like 4 different departments if I want to talk to a guy from Unity and like sit down with them and make a video. And even though I think those would have been maybe also very interesting, this is what you get basically. I think Unity is still a good engine. Am I a shill for it? I don't think I'm a shill for it. I think it's kind of like console wars or AMD versus Nvidia. Doesn't really matter at the end of the day. just go and make games. So thank you very much for watching. I'll be making a bit more content here at Unity U Day in Tokyo, so be sure to subscribe for that. And otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!